tried and true techniques for writing your first book. Simple steps for organizing your manuscript. Well, hello there. My name is Kathy Lynn Marshall, and here's a little bit about my backstory. I worked for the California Highway Patrol for 36 years, and 33 years there, I was a researcher, analyst, and technical writer. So I started when I was really young, 1976. I was 19. And on my second day of work there, a coworker came up to me and said, "What are you? Where are you from? What's your family?" And I really didn't know why we look the way we look. So I wrote letters to my grandmothers asking us, "Where's our chocolate brown skin?" And that's how my love of genealogy started. So it's been over 40 years. And over time, life happened. I was married, worked full-time, had children, and so I could only devote a couple of hours every couple of months to genealogy. So I really didn't do much for 40 years. I collected a lot of documents, threw them in a box, left some of them in my computer, but basically I didn't do much with all that data, all that information. Until 2016, when I was living the 60th year of my life, and I got scared. All those documents are sitting there in a disorganized heap, and my kids are going to throw it away if I die tomorrow. They don't know what to do with all that stuff. I don't know what to do with that stuff. So October 1st, 2016, I was finally able to do something about it. I had started going to genealogy conferences, getting on Facebook. They have a lot of Facebook pages that are dedicated towards genealogy, and especially African American genealogy, because it's different. It's harder for people whose ancestors were enslaved to find data, information, documents that have their names on them, because slaves were treated as property, and it's just difficult. But these experts on the Facebook pages, like Our Black Ancestry, helped me a lot. And so I saw a webinar that took place, and I participated in it on October 1st, 2016. And this webinar taught African Americans how to write our own stories instead of letting others write our history for us. I was ready to hear it. Do you know what I'm saying? I was scared that all my stuff was going to get thrown away. I was ready to get the solution. And in that webinar, they said, well, basically what we're going to talk about today. And I realized just in that moment that I could use the same process I had developed for the California Highway Patrol, the same process that I taught to over 600 analysts over a 10-year period, this process for finishing assignments that required a written output. And all of a sudden the light bulb went on in my head, and I said, oh my gosh, I can use the same quick start process for writing books. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And it's helped me publish at least one book per year since 2016. And some of my books have won multiple awards, so that's really cool. So let's get started and see if maybe whatever I have to say will help you too. That's my hope, is that you can glean information that will help motivate you to get started too. If even one thing that I talk about today helps you, fantastic. All right, my intention for today is to help you complete a focus exercise. Now, this is the very first step in my process, and I'm hoping to encourage you to do the exercise along with me. That way, you'll be able to make this yours. So if you'd like to participate, please get a piece of paper and pencil now, or a pen, just something to write answers to 5 simple questions. This will help customize my process for you. We're going to talk about how to create and fill your manuscript template. We're going to get your book started today. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to ready your manuscript for printing. Now, each of my books has a Solving Your Mystery chapter or appendix in it. And it has all of my secrets, all of my tips and hints and ways that you might be able to use for your book too. And they're in each of my books that are available on Amazon or my website. But please save your questions until the end so we can get through all this material. But I can't write! I hear that all the time from people. And I don't know if you feel this way too. But guess what? The process I'm going to talk about is mainly an organizational tool Okay, it's to how to start your book, how to get yourself going. So it has nothing to do with writing perfect or clever sentences, not at the beginning. In the beginning, it's all about structure and organization, how to get your book started. So please breathe a sigh of relief and get ready to start your book now. By the way, you don't have to sell your book. A lot of people clam up as soon as you say, well, let's write a book. They think automatically they've got to sell it, and they don't want to. You've got to know what your goal is. If you just want to hand a book to your family, great, do that. If you want to be a bestseller, great, do that. But it's going to be a lot of work. But you can do both too. But you don't have to sell your book just because it's out there. What I generally do is I think about the end result first. So back at CHP, either I had to write a memo or a letter or an actual report. And so I had to know what the end result was first. And that helped me to structure the beginning of the assignment. So that's what I would suggest that you do too. Think about your finished product. What end result would showcase your writing's best? Now, for me personally, I'm interested in paperback, ebook, hardback, but you could put your writings in a Facebook page, or maybe you'll want to have a newsletter that you send out to your family. Photo books are exceptional. They're little 20-page books that have photographs, but they also can have texts. So if you're a poet, you could do 20 poems in a photo book. They're 20 pages each. It's a real simple alternative. Maybe a movie. For me, a documentary would be my end all. That's really what I'm hoping for. But also maybe just a website or a blog. A lot of people are blogs. You can have a poetry blog. You can have a short story blog. Many genealogists have genealogy blogs. Think about your end product first. So let's get into the good stuff. What's my secret? I have a few very important secrets that will help you going and be successful in writing your book. The first one is a focus exercise. Now, I personally prefer to write first edition books. And what that means is that I'm going to come up with just a few goals. I'm going to research them. I'm going to write them to the best that I can within a short time period. I give myself 9 months to research and write a book, and 3 months to do all the rest. That's the editing, the layout, the cover, that sort of thing. You need to figure out what you want. A first edition book means I'm going to do the best I can, and maybe I can't find all the proof that I need for the first book, but maybe I find 92% of all of it. That's good enough for me. I'm going to publish that book and realize that in 3, 5, 10 years down the road, maybe there will be more information available. I write genealogy, nonfiction books. For a fiction writer, obviously you want the end. But for me, I can write a first edition book and then come back in a few years with more information for a second edition. This allows me to print my darn book and stop waiting for 20 years until I get everything. No. I'm going to get a few things done in this book and be glad about it and just come back later if I need to. So, let's do a 5-minute exercise now. Please get a pencil and paper or pen, something to write. I've just got 5 questions for you. It'll take 5 minutes. But this step is critical to make my process work. So why not give it a try? It will make the rest of this presentation more understandable because you're going to customize it for you and your desire for what you want to write. Okay? Let's get started. Let's pretend that I'm giving you a magic wand. And with this magic wand, you are going to be able to get away from everything for 24 hours. So your spouse, your children, your job, all your responsibilities are going to be taken care of for 24 hours. And that's going to allow you to go anywhere in time, any place in the world, to meet with one person. So here's your first question. If I give you a magic wand and I do all your stuff for you, who would you like to meet with for 24 hours? So write WHO on your paper and write the name of the person that you would love to interview, to be with for 24 hours. And it's with the intention that you would write a book about that person, okay? So for fiction writers, your who could be your protagonist. How wonderful would it be to be able to meet with your protagonist and say, hey, how does this book end? How does this story end? For memoir writers, people like myself, nonfiction writers, your who could be an ancestor. That brick wall person that you just, for people who were adopted, if you never knew your parents, maybe you'd like your who to be your mom or your dad. Write the name of that person. If you don't know their name, just put my mom or my dad. All right, first step, that's the first question. All righty, the second question is why? Please write WHY on your paper. Why did you choose your who person? So why are they so special that you would want to write a book about them? What is it about them that really helps you? In my case, my who person was my grandpa, Austin Marshall, shown in the picture here. Why? Well, because nobody knew much about him. And I couldn't write a Marshall heritage book without knowing about Grandpa first. The third question is, what 3 things do you already know about your who person? Now you can add more than 3, but I start with 3. So I've been collecting information, collecting documents since 1976. I had some things, a few little stories here and there about Grandpa. In 1966, I actually met him. So I was able to write down the 3 things that I observed about him. What 3 things do you already know about your who person? So memoir examples are a lot. There might be a biography already written on that person, might be some photographs, various vital records documents, census documents, land records, etc. Whatever you already know, and it could be stories from your relatives. Write them down. But right now for this exercise, just write 3 things. If you're a fiction or poetry or short story writer, maybe you could write 3 characteristics about your main character that you want the reader to know. Whatever it is that you already know about your character, go ahead and write them down on the paper now. Number 4, this is the setting. Where? Please write WHERE on your paper. Where does your story take place, or where do you think it's going to take place? For us, we can look at census records to find out where the person was living at a given time. You can write one or many places where the person lived. Now, for those of you who are fiction writers, maybe your setting takes place in outer space or the underground or a specific city or whatever. So just put down the setting where, and you could have multiple settings, of course, multiple places, but just to get us started with this process. And the last question, see, I told you this was quick. What 3 things what 3 things would you like to know about your who person? So during your 24-hour visit, what questions are you really sure that you're going to ask? So what if you were adopted? You might want to know, why did you give me up? Who were my grandparents? Lots of questions you could ask as that example. And so in my case, I do slave research. So I always want to know, who was your slave owner? Because for African Americans, it's really hard to find information about our families prior to 1870. You have to almost know who the slave owner was, and 80 to 90% of Black people in America had been enslaved at some point in their lives prior to 1865. So that's a biggie for me. Who was your slave owner? So I can look at that slave owner's property records and places where slave names might be listed. DNA. DNA is really cool. If you're doing genealogy, I'm telling you, it's a quick magic hit there of information. So can DNA find our cousins? If you're a fiction, poetry, short story writer, what kind of theme are you going to have? What's the lesson to be learned? What's the protagonist going to be like? Who was killed and why? What's the next step in the process? Whatever it is for your particular genre and your desire for your book, what 3 things do you want to know? Now, again, I kind of recommend you keep it to 3 to 5 just to keep the book manageable so that you can actually publish it and be successful getting the job done. But you do what's right for you. My method, I'm not saying it's the end all. Did you hear that? I'm not saying this method is the end all and is perfect for everyone, but there might be parts of the process that do help you. Cool. All right, we've finished the most important part, the focus exercise. Now, did you know that everything about your book, let's say you want to actually print a book, everything about your book must be in one document, one word processing document. All the words, all the photos, all the everything. Your citations, if you're going to have that. Manuscripts, which basically is a book that's not been printed yet, is the manuscript. Manuscripts must be typed on a computer, then uploaded to a printing service. So if you've got to get it on a computer anyway, why not start that way? So that's what this process is all about, is being efficient in how you start and organize your book so it's easier for you to print it and get the final result. For people of a certain age, it's not about the journey anymore. It's about the destination, the book in hand, the printed book in hand that you can give other people. So I'm trying to make this process efficient to allow your creativity to have a place to flow into. But if you're not a computer whiz, ask your kids, your grandkids, maybe a neighbor kid, maybe you could take a computer class. You really just need to know the basics about computers. How do I turn it on? How do I get into my manuscript document that's in the computer, the file that's in the computer, how to save your work, and how to insert a new page. That's really about it. And if you still need help, just hire someone. Because then they can show you, and there are lots of classes around too that you could take, little short classes that could give you the basics. Now this is the second big step, super important. If I know that I want a paperback, why don't I just start day one by formatting that word processing document that I just talked about in the previous slide? Why don't I format it to look like a book? So what that means is the first page of a book is the title page. Then some books have like a face page, which is basically a repetition of the title and the author's name. A lot of books have an introduction, dedication, acknowledgments, all those kind of pages. If you do this template, it's like an outline of a book. It's a blank outline waiting for you to fill it. So if you've already written some little short stories, or you've written some poems, or you've got some ideas that you've written down somewhere, you can type them into this book template right away. It gives you a place to put all of your creative ideas. Instead of having Post-it notes all over the place, like some of us did for many years, you have a place to actually put your writings. When you wake up in the morning and you have that perfect paragraph, put it in your book template right away. That's what this is about. And the other beauty of having a book template is that you can print drafts and it's going to look like a book. And when it looks like a book, it stimulates you, it motivates you. It says, I'm on the way. This is just an example of a table of contents from my Marshall Legacy in Black and White book that was published in 2021. And it has an introduction, it has a family tree, it has a descendants chart, like a family, another type of family tree. There's a preface in there, and then of course my chapters. Now in many of my books I have part 1, part 2, part 3. You don't have to have that in your book. But the point is once you develop this book template, this blank book basically, this manuscript that you can put stuff in, start typing your story into your book template today. You can always fix the formatting later. You can worry about spelling later. We're talking about the very beginning stages. You can modify anything I say later. This just gets you started. You can choose a built-in book template. Microsoft Word already has templates. So most of us, when we start a new document, we open up a new blank page. Well, guess what? There's a ton of different, if you want to do a newsletter, they already have templates in there. There's very few in Microsoft Word regarding book templates, which is very bizarre. Apple Pages has a nice variety. But most people use Microsoft Word, so I'll talk about that. There are lots of different templates in there. You can make a coloring book, your own coloring book. There's all kinds of stuff. Choose the style you want and save it to your computer using your Who as the title of the book. Now, I'm an Apple user, And I would love to be able to use Apple Pages for my books because they have a bunch of book templates already built in. Here's just a sample of the book templates that are in portrait mode. There's a basic photo book that you can have. So there's a contemporary novel, there's an elegant novel, a personal novel, and some of these have different pages within them that are already set up. They're already formatted for you. You just have to double click on it, save it to your computer, and start customizing it for your book. It's super simple. I don't know why it's not the same for Microsoft Word, but it isn't, sadly. All right, here's a quickie example. Hopefully most of you are kind of familiar with Microsoft Word and kind of familiar with your computers. But bottom line, you would open up Microsoft Word, click on the File menu on top, scroll down until you see New from Template. So don't do the new document like we always do for a new blank document. Instead, do the New from Template option, and it's going to give you a wide range of different type of options. Now, if we just want to look at the book template, in the upper right corner on the Microsoft Word, the little blue line that most people probably have, it'll have a little micro, what do you call that thing, a looking glass. Type the word book, and it will bring up all of the templates that have to do with books, coloring books, poetry books, whatever. And so anyway, there's nonfiction, novel, poetry styles. Click twice on the desired book template and it'll come up. Okay, let's look at the options, the few options that Microsoft Word gives you with regard to templates. In the upper row, second from the left, there's a Write Nonfiction option. It's very complicated though for some reason. If you look in the upper right, it says Creative Bookmarks, so you can make your own bookmarks. How cool is that? The lower row to the left is the poetry booklet, which I'm going to show you a little bit, but there are a few other options in Microsoft Word. I cannot understand why there aren't more, but there you go. Let's look at the poetry selection. One example from Microsoft Word, it's a sample poetry template. And this is the closest that I could find that's easy to use in Microsoft Word for just a regular book. The very first page on the left, it gives you a sample that could be your book title. Type the who, where it says book title, just type over it with the name of your who. And then at the bottom of the page, type your name because you are the author. If you want some kind of icon, you can change out the little picture of the flower for whatever you want for your book. Initially, I just put something, a placeholder, because you can modify it later. You can make a nice fancy cover later. This is just giving you a bare bones to get you going. In this particular poetry template, it has two different types of book titles that you could use, pages, just sample pages. Get rid of, delete the one that you don't like. There's a copyright page in there. You can look at copyrights.org, O-R-G. Again, if you look at my Solving Your Mystery page in any one of my books, it has specific links for all this stuff that I'm going to say. But look at books in the genre that you're writing. What do they have on their copyright page? You can type it in right now, or you can just leave it as is and modify it later. There's a table of contents in this one. I am a nonfiction writer. I'm going to have a table of contents. You may not need one if you're writing a romance novel. Poem title. Poem, you can substitute the word chapter. So chapter number 1 if you want. But if you are a poet, this is the easiest kind of book to make. So let's say you have 20 poems. Copy this page, the one that says poem title, copy it 10 times or 20 times. And so each page you can put a different poem on if you like. Same with short story writers. This is the very perfect, most easiest way to get a book done using this method is if you're a short story writer. It'd be story number 1, story number 2, and then you would put the actual title of the story underneath it. And then there's an author page also on this particular template. So you could put a biography, you could put your picture, you could put whatever you want to put. This is just a placeholder to get you started. Now I always, well, let's go on. Once you've done the bare bones with this template, you've just made, put titles on the top of these pages. You've made I give myself 10 chapters to start with. You can always add more chapters later. They're blank chapters. Chapter number 1, chapter number 2, chapter number 3. I just label them in my template and then save it to a folder on your computer or the desktop, however you wish to do it. And again, I just suggest to get started, type the name of your who on the title of the book file. So when you go to save your file, just put your who's name as the name of the file. And then it will end in a .doc, which would indicate it's a Word, Microsoft Word file. So your book template is ready to fill with stories, poems, photos, charts, family trees, or whatever the heck you want, because you are on your way. Seriously, it can be this simple. So you want to know which pages should go in your book, which blank pages should go in your book. Examine books in your genre for typical page types and add them to your book template. So for an example, my understanding, I'm not an expert, but romance novels, I think you need the title, if you're going to sell it, a copyright page, and number the chapters. Chapter 1, 2, 3, that's it. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. For memoir writers, the above options, but you could put a table of contents in there. You can put a dedication. I dedicate this book to my intrepid ancestors, whatever you want. Acknowledgements. If people helped you write this book in any way, you can acknowledge their help. For nonfiction, other types of nonfiction books, you can do any of the above that we just talked about. Plus, you might want to have a bibliography and footnotes, because for nonfiction, like especially for genealogy, I like to follow the genealogical proof standard, which states that you need to look at all possible resources and you need to cite those sources in your book. Complete citations. And so I try to adhere to that. You may want to put photographs and charts and graphs, a forward. I do a lot of that. I have a lot of pictures in my books because this book may be the only thing that my family and others who are interested in genealogy actually know about this person. Plus it adds that aura of proof. And so I have a lot of pictures in my works, and most people don't, but that's okay. If it's self-published, you can do what you want. So again, the who could be your book title. In this case, this is The Mystery of Margaret Booker. Margaret Booker was my great-great-great-grandmother. And then my name's on the front. The why could be in the introduction and the chapter 1. All right, so that the three things that I said, write down what you already know. For me, a genealogist, for this first book, this Otho Williams book, I knew nothing at all. None of us in my whole family knew anything about Otho Williams. He was my great-great-grandfather, and all we had was the 1870 and 1880 census, but we did not have independent knowledge of anything about him. So all I had was the census. So for me, I started chapter 2. That's all I knew. I can't write anything else. I don't know anything else. So this is how I started the book. It morphed as time went on, and I was able to move chapters around. But chapter 2 did still remain what I already know. So in that case, I talked about the 1870 and the 1880 census and what it meant. I did a neighborhood analysis to show folks what my Otho was like. But not everyone loves charts and graphs like I do, because I was a researcher and an analyst. I love them. But most people shut down. Talk about statistics and they shut down. So what I did was try to find an interesting way of introducing Otho as a character, as the main character in the book. And the book is most of my books are written from the point of view of the focus person. And so I started to interact with Otho in this chapter 2. That's why it's called Introducing Otho Williams. You do what's good for you. This is just an example, and hopefully you can transition this example into something that works for your book and your book style. Okay, the next item on our focus exercise is the where. So the where your who lived may be incorporated into the setting of your storyline or become a separate chapter. Now again, for me, since I normally know almost nothing about my main character, my focus person, when I start these books, I have to find a document that's going to give me a clue as to where they were. So a census document is the easiest form for a genealogist to be able to pinpoint where your ancestor was at that point in time that the census was taken. So in my Marshall Legacy book, I did know that my grandpa Austin was born in Columbus, Georgia. So I did mega research on Columbus, Georgia, and especially the African American community there. And it's a rich history, not necessarily always a good history slavery-wise, but there's a lot of information available on that. And so I was able to get kind of an idea of the context of my character, my grandfather. And so for me, I left that as chapter 3, just as it was in the original focus exercise. So I would say something like, toot toot, sounded the air horn as the Central of Georgia train pulled out of Union Station, blah, blah, blah. So it goes into what it actually was like, and this is based on a lot of writings that I was able to find during the time period where my grandfather lived there. So each of your what 3 things do you want to know? Each of your what could be a goal, and each one could be a separate chapter. So again, for me, I'm doing slave research. So for me, my goals are always to find out the focus person, who were the parents of the focus person. Okay, so that's going back in time. Who were the descendants? That's coming forward to today. And I always do the siblings of that focus person. So I end up kind of covering that family line. But I also want to know who the slave owner was. I need to know the slave owner. And I always want to know, can DNA help me find more relatives? I always want to know that. Now that may not be appropriate for you. Here's a sample of that Marshall Legacy book, the chapters in there. So the chapter, I said I want to know who the parents are. So in this case, chapter 4, Pawpaw, that's his dad. Mama was his, well, actually it was his grandfather, and Mama was grandmother. There's one on the Great War, World War I, and his service in France. So you can bring history into your book if you want to. Write about, I have a lot of history in my book, because I usually really can't find a whole lot on my actual ancestors. So you do what you do. This is just an example. And the most important thing, label those chapters. Even if you're a fiction writer, it's really helpful to do some research on the topic so that your story is more believable. Even though it's, sci-fi, fantasy, whatever, you still want people to think that maybe this could be true. I think so. I shouldn't put my own opinion on that. Anyway, I have a Solving Your Mystery chapter in each of my books, and it has a lot of research ideas and links to websites that may help family historians and others who are doing research. So, if any part of that helps you, great, fantastic. Check them out in the back of my books. What I like to do also is once I've got the book template formed, I've got all my chapters labeled with what the chapter is about, like if it's about the parents or if it's about the slave owner, then I go ahead and type research questions. What is it that I want to know more about? What are my goals for this? And I just put them in the chapter itself. I don't use Post-it notes. I don't handwrite them. I don't scribble them anywhere else. I put them inside the book template. That's how you grow your book. That's how you keep all the concepts and ideas together, and it makes it easier to write the story, I believe at least. You can try it and see if it works for you. When I wake up in the morning and I've got that paragraph all ready to go, I go ahead and type it right away in the book chapter. Turn your questions and answers into paragraphs that you can put into your book template. And then, of course, if you're a nonfiction writer, please include your citations in footnotes or endnotes to make it so that the reader can find out more information if they want to. Woo! It's getting exciting! Fill that book, baby! So hopefully you've been inserting your writings and ideas and your research questions into the correct chapter of your book template. So check this out. This is for real. This is true. I woke up one morning with 4 chapters in my head regarding my Grandma Daisy's last decade of life. So that's my Finding Daisy book. And I woke up and I had her last decade. All the words, everything. And so I got out my smartphone. It's right there next to my bed. And I turned on the dictation program. whatever you have, voice memos, whatever your app is called, and I dictated those stories into my smartphone. Then I went over to my computer, my Word document, and I played my dictation into the computer. It translated it into words. I did have to do some proofing and make some changes to the words, but that's how you can get your stories. Instead of handwriting them in a steno notepad, stop doing that, please. Just get them into your book chapter in any way you can. And so I verbalized that story in just a hot minute. It took me a couple hours. I had 20,000 words. Part 4 was done. Because I had a place to put it. I had the book template. It was ready to go. I was done with part 4. Like that. So as needed, reorder your paragraphs and your chapters within the manuscript. What I'm talking about here is a way to start your manuscript. Of course, through the process, when you get more information and more ideas, you can move chapters around, you can move paragraphs around, of course. I just want to get you started. For those of you who have already written some stories, you've already collected some information, you've already taken some pictures, I want to give you a space, a landing place where you can put those writings today. Build your book today. You really can do that. I came up with, 40, 50 pages the first day just because I'd been collecting information, and now I had a place to put it within a book manuscript. And so it really can help you out. I hope you try it. Just try the method and see if it works for you. But I really can't write. I don't know spelling. I don't know grammar. I don't know any of that stuff. Well, the best bang for your buck, perhaps, is purchasing a program called Grammarly or Pro Writing Aid. I know they work with Microsoft Word. I'm not sure about Apple Pages. Let the computer give you hints. So as you're typing your story, the computer can give you hints on how to spell it and tell you why it's better to use an active verb versus a passive verb, all that good stuff. Or you can join a writing or critique group like the Elk Grove Writers Guild. The Senior Center in Elk Grove has a Monday afternoon writers group. There's, of course, the California Writers Club, the Northern California Publishers and Authors. So join some of those groups, get an idea, surround yourself with writers that are doing what you want to do, because they can give you feedback on your content, or you can take writing classes if you want. And then the last steps, which are important, very important, you've got to create a cover for your book. Now, depending on what you want to do, I choose to use Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP.com. I use it because it's extremely economical, and once you get the first book under your belt, it's a very simple process to use. It's really simple, and I like that. But if you don't want to feed into the monster Amazon, you could use Lulu, Lulu.com. That's an independent printer, which is very good. And there's Ingram Spark, which is good if you want to get your books into bookstores and university libraries. A lot of people I know use a product called Canva, C-A-N-V-A, or you can hire someone. You can pay them hundreds of dollars to make a cover for you. I like to do things free, if I can. I always pay for an editor, but I generally do everything else myself, right or wrong. So you've got to have a cover. You need to perfect your layout, meaning all of your fonts need to be consistent. The spacing that you use must be consistent. Of course, there's, but anyway, so if you're not comfortable with that, if you use the template, like I suggested early on, then a lot of your formatting is going to already be done. The template will already do that. And if you don't use a lot of pictures like I do, I put a lot of photographs in it, which makes the layout really tough. If you don't have any photographs, it's pretty simple. If you use one of those templates from, that I showed you from Microsoft Word or Apple Pages or whatever your word processing program is. This next one, the third bullet, get beta readers, is really important. And all that means is people will read your manuscript. So before you send it to the high price editor, you want to have people read your work to give you some, just their impressions about it. I'm really close to this slave issue. Slavery is not a popular issue. It's not a popular topic, and I'd rather not have to to do that. But so I get people who maybe aren't as knowledgeable about the topic as I. You definitely want to get people in your target audience to be beta readers. And what they'll do is they'll just read it. They'll read through your manuscript and they'll give you some feedback. Hopefully it's honest feedback so that you can make improvements on your book. You can choose to make improvements on your book. The fourth one is critical. You must retain an editor. Not necessarily an English teacher, but they're good, of course, obviously. But an editor really, really knows what to look for with regard to publishing a book. They're going to check for sure the grammar and the spelling. And if you get an editor that will also do a content edit, which is kind of like what the beta readers do, they'll really scrutinize, does this make sense? Did this really flow well? And all that. So, so getting an editor is often kind of on the expensive side, and it just depends on what you want them to do. I choose to provide to my editor my manuscript with the layout all done, all of the photos perfect, my bibliography as perfect as I can get it. Everything is as perfect as I know how to make it so that that editor can see what my intention is for the final product. Most people don't do that. They just hand the editor words, paragraphs, words that I understand, at least the people that I've talked to. It's totally up to you as to how you want to handle it. But the editor is going to give you really good feedback on how you should, and I won't say must fix it, but should fix it. And it's just very, very important that you do that. And then right before you publish it, you've got to have someone proofread it, somebody who really knows grammar and spelling and layout, to proofread it to make sure everything is as perfect as possible. Now, I've personally not come across any book that has absolutely no mistakes in it. I always find at least one mistake in every book, whether it's a big-time publisher or a self-publisher such as myself. But you try to get every error out, right? You want it to be perfect before you print. Now, you can print this manuscript on your home printer, put a staple on it or a 3-hole punch, or you can go to a local printer, like in Elk Grove, California. There's Cornerstone Printing, which is really does a really good job. They can do spiral bound, staple it, 3-hole punch, and they can print books in a book format. So you have those options. I choose to upload it to Kindle Direct Publishing so that it's on Amazon, because everybody knows Amazon. It's there. It's easy for me now. It's very economical to do it that way. But once you print and publish your masterpiece, you can rejoice and go out to dinner and pat yourself on the back for a job well done. Alrighty. So I think I mentioned this earlier, solving your mystery. If this is too fast, because I really can't put too much into these short presentations, each of my books has a solving your mystery chapter or appendix. And it just has all the things that I use. To the degree it may or may not help you. It would be particularly good if you're into genealogy, family history, memoir. It would be particularly helpful for those types of folks. But you may get something else too. I've got links in there, resources, how to interview people, DNA. The second book up here from the right, Finding Otho, has 4 chapters on DNA. What is it? What do the major companies use? What bang do you get for your buck? And then there's one chapter on how I use DNA to find my European ancestors, and the last chapter in the book is how I use DNA to find my African ancestors. So if you've got an interest in that, the book was written in 2018, so some of the offerings from DNA companies are slightly different, but the basic process is very similar still. Anyway, so if any of this makes sense to you and you want more information, the Solving Your Mystery chapter may help you. Lots of information, and it has the steps for self-publishing also. And to summarize, so we talked about deciding on your end result first. What is it that you want? Because that way you can then structure your process to meet that end result. And we did a focus exercise that helped to determine which book you should write based on your needs and your goals and your wants. we talked about how to create a template for your book today, how to label each of your chapter headings today. And then you can paste your research questions, documents, photos, partial stories, those part stories that you've written, the things that are on the post-it notes, type them into the correct chapter of your book template today. And it's just so important. Just anything you've already done that's been all over in boxes and folders and under your bed, type them into the correct chapter today. Worry about paragraphs, spelling, and grammar a little bit later. Grow your book today. That's my main point. Get started. Let's get started, okay? You can do it. So if you have any questions, feel free to enter them into the chat. And here's my contact information. On the left are the books that I've already published from 2017 and on. The Ancestors Are Smiling, Finding Otho, The Search for Our Enslaved Williams Ancestors, which takes place in Maryland. Finding Daisy, From the Deep South to the Promised Land, which takes place in the Deep South and Cleveland, Ohio. The Mystery of Margaret Booker takes place in what is now West Virginia and Ohio. The Marshall Legacy in Black and White takes place in Georgia, North Carolina, and Ohio. And Ken Anderson, alias Special K, mainly takes place in Sacramento, California. And Black and White, Peering into the Unknown Past, is scheduled for spring of 2022. And that's about this fantastic genealogy trip that I took with the 6th great-granddaughter of my family's slave owner. So she and I, white-black, have a common ancestor. And we toured Georgia, of all places, and had these wonderful discussions about race, things that you're afraid to talk to about the other people, and it was just a wonderful experience. And so it's a book that kind of helps people do the same thing if they're interested in having a coming to the table meeting with their family members too, especially family members of different backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds. And anyway, so that's it. If you need to get in touch with me, my website is kanikamarshall.com. Facebook pages for each of my book, which is kind of like a blog for the books, and a YouTube channel if you want to look at some of the videos. I've videotaped all of these presentations. So get in contact with me if you want more information. Thank you so much for having me, and good luck. You can do it.